people shopping stage pianos in 2025, if you're looking at Yamaha's options, they're going to serve you up with the YC series and the CK series. These two pianos look like they've come from two completely different companies. Now, the YC series remains the premium option, even though it came out in 2021. The CK series, however, 2 years newer, is the cheaper option, but is it actually inferior? So in today's video, we're gonna break down the exact differences and similarities between these pianos and help you figure out what one is the best fit.
Everybody, before we get too far into today's comparison, I wanted to take a moment and ask a favor. If you are part of the 50% of our audience that is not yet subscribed, hit that button. There's all kinds of great reasons to do so. First of all, you're going to get access to draws, we post polls, you're going to get exclusive content as well as discounts on product. But what's more, you help the channel keep going so that we can produce content like this week after week. So thanks for being our latest subscriber, and now back to today's video.
First, let's start with the key action. Now, this is probably one of the most straightforward comparisons because the difference is so clear. On the YC88, we are dealing with a wood-plastic hybrid action. Now, this is an action that is going to replicate the feel of an acoustic piano a lot closer than the action that we have on the CK88. So for pianists and keyboardists who are already used to playing a lot of acoustic piano and really want to have that comfort and sense of control that those actions give you, well, the YC88 is definitely the route that you're going to want to go. Beyond just the physical feel and mechanism of the key, there's also a sensor difference. So on the YC88, we have a triple sensor, while over on the GHS, we have a double sensor. And this starts to point to a major difference in where Yamaha thinks these two keyboards are going to be used, but we're going to leave that to a little later. You're going to feel that on the YC88, your black keys have a natural ebony texture to it, and the white keys have a slightly more matted texture. Over on the CK series, we've got a non-textured but matte finish on the black keys and a fairly high gloss finish on the white keys. Now let's move on to the tone engines, because again, here we've got clear differences. On the YC88, we actually have 3 different tone engines driving this instrument depending on which patch you are using. And on the organ, this is a dedicated VCM tone engine. This is one of Yamaha's most advanced, if not the most advanced, digital tone wheel organ engines that they equip in any of their machines. So in terms of using this as a studio quality sound source, this is the one you're going to want to go with. For the majority of the other tones, you're going to be using their AWM2 sound engine, which is their Advanced Wave Memory 2. And then for some of your EPs, they've got the FM tone engine, which is actually kind of a vintage reboot of some of their earlier synthesis technology brought into modern stage pianos. On the CK88, we basically have the AWM2 tone engine with a few actually other tones downgraded to the original AWM tone engines. So in terms of using studio grade, modern, up-to-date sound sources, the CK88 is going to be totally sufficient for live use and let's call it home studio or prosumer level tone quality, depending on whether you're using, say, the organ, the piano, or some of the pads. You'll notice that, yes, there is commonality with the joint use of the AWM2, but not necessarily for some of the critical stuff like organ. Now, both instruments also have a similar polyphony at 128. Now, once you load up 3 simultaneous patches and with a maximum polyphony of 128, you might actually start to get close to or exceed that max limit in certain situations, which is a slightly surprising spec given that most of the other stage pianos out on the market are going to have polyphonies of 192 or 256. So this sets up my next comparison, which really is, broadly speaking, the control surfaces and approach between these two instruments. In my humble opinion, the CK88 is following the golden rule of design, which is function leads form. Over on the YC88, I feel like that kind of got flipped a little bit. There was a heavy desire to bring a vintage retro look to this instrument, and in my opinion, the functionality of its design has been compromised a little bit. It's not bad, you know, you still have the ability to really mostly accomplish what you're trying to do, but I think they were really doing everything they could to kind of get these vintage cues in, such as these various little switches and just the overall color scheme and use of some of these more, you know, retro switches up and down. I'll admit it's a cool looking instrument, but there's no question between these two instruments which one is faster to be able to quickly call up the patches you want, apply the settings and the effects that you want, get it saved, and just using the instrument right out of the gate. In terms of assignable controls, they're pretty similar. We've got a pair of assignable foot controls. We've got the option to assign our two wheels, or in the case of the YC, the two toggles over here. We've got the option to save live sets, quickly change split points and split types, octave shift, transpose, all of the stuff that you'd normally be looking for in a stage piano. Both are quite similar in their offering. Now let's get to the effects, and this is one of the places where it starts to get a little bit confusing which is the superior instrument here. Because in using both of these machines, I have to admit the CK88 has a much more straightforward, easy to use, and in a lot of ways more comprehensive effects package on it than the YC88 does. The envelope controls are easy to use, the digital effects processing is easy to call up and really visually see what's being applied to each. I think the menu, a combination of menu and on instrument labels, makes it a little easier to navigate. Plus, it's very clear that for all three of the patches, you have a full, clean effects chain that you can manipulate for each one, kind of similar to what Nord has done. Now, on the YC unit, it's a little more convoluted. Not impossible, and you can wrap your head around it fairly simply. It's definitely not as intuitive as the CK. For each of the keys patches, A and B, you have the ability to apply one effect with a depth and rate control on there. And you have to use a combination of both the up and down keys as well as looking at the screen to be able to affect those. Then you've got the option of applying an additional effect, which you can have global. Then you've got the option to apply a second effect just to one of the three. You've got the option of applying a speaker amp sim, again, just to one of the three. And then you've got your reverbs, which you can have globally applied or just singularly. So if you're wanting to add a second effect, or forget that, just visually having a really nice, clean way of seeing exactly what you've applied to each of the three, there's just no getting around the fact that the YC is a little clunkier to both visualize and manipulate compared to the CK. So on the CK88, we've got a really nice, clear flow. We've got three buttons right side by side to turn on and off our three patches. The other thing that I like about the CK88 in this case is that you don't need to have the first one be the organ. So you could have three patches really of any kind, whereas the YC88, your first patch is always the organ. And then to select what you're going to be manipulating, you can just press the A, B, or C. You even have the ability to change those colors if you want to. So if we are looking at A, and right now this is set to piano, we have the option, you probably wouldn't usually do it with piano, but you've got the option to mess with your sort of your filters and your envelope control here, your attack, release, your resonance, and your cutoff, and you can easily turn those on and off, and those are per voice. So if we turn B on, for example, we can turn all those off. If we go back to A, we can see those are still on, and they're color-coded. So it makes it easy for your eye to know exactly whether you're dealing with B for blue, which kind of makes it easy, on, or A. And of course, the same thing goes for C. So within that, we've also got our amp simulator. So you've got your overdrives, distortions, your rotaries, and your compression that you can apply there, again, per voice. And then finally over here, just some sort of other DSP stuff like your chorus, wah, delay, reverb, everything. And that, of course, is per voice. Once you get over behind this kind of double line, which is pretty subtle, but essentially this becomes now universal or global. So this is going to affect all three voices all the time. This is not going to matter which one you're selecting. If that's in there, it's going to be applied. So you've got a global delay, you've got a global reverb, and a global equalizer as well. So another area where things get a little convoluted between these two is when we get to the USB audio interface. On the YC88, we have USB audio. We can pass all of the internally generated sound digitally to a DAW. Likewise, if we have this connected to a DAW, we can have all of the sound being produced by the DAW passing through here and then out to the audio outputs. So basically it eliminates the need to have an interface on a stage if you're going to be using any sort of an external sound source, and it also makes recording this a heck of a lot easier. But one of the things you'll notice on the YC88 is you've got 2 1/4-inch inputs, and really the only thing this does is it allows you to take in another audio source, but you still need to use that small knob on the back to basically mix it with the internal sound, and there's no digitization of that signal. So it literally passes directly from the inputs into the outputs, and there's no signal processing on this either. Over on the CK88, we have both. Not only do we have the ability to actually apply some effects to that signal, but the signal is converted into a digital signal. So as you're bringing in that signal through your 1/4-inch inputs, it's converting it to digital and combining it with your USB audio output or the analog audio output to your PA or some other recording device. So point is you have quite a bit more versatility with how it's treating those input sources on the CK88 than the YC88. And then yet another critical difference, in my opinion, between these two machines is the fact that the CK88 has onboard speakers and the YC88 doesn't. Now, granted, stage pianos typically don't have speakers, and this is because they're already so heavy because they've usually prioritized a really high quality action and overall build quality on the frame that they don't want to add yet more weight by adding speakers and the amplifiers that go along with them. But there are a few exceptions out there, and the CK88 and Roland's RD88 and 08 are some of those exceptions. And while the speakers on the CK88 aren't going to be winning any awards, they certainly are sufficient to get a pretty decent sound for the purpose of private playing or even a rehearsal. So there are definitely some use cases where the YC88 is still very much worth the money. If you are going to be using this machine as a studio grade sound source, and particularly with the organ, well, there's no question that the quality of the tone wheel generator, Hammond generator on the YC88 is of higher quality and higher fidelity than the CK88. Also, if you're going to be playing this a lot in acoustic piano mode and the quality and the feel of the action is really critical to you, well, again, YC88 comes out on top. And if you're going to be loading and unloading this thing on and off stages multiple times a week, the build quality on the chassis of the YC88 is certainly going to come in very handy and going to give you a nice long life. And so all of those are pretty logical reasons why the machine would be more expensive. But there's a few features and design choices on the CK88 that kind of screw that calculus up a little bit, at least for some users. If you are going to be using this almost entirely live and you aren't going to be taking it out multiple times a week, well, first of all, the extra heavy-duty chassis that the YC might be giving you might not be worth the extra bucks. Additionally, if you're going to be playing this mostly in, say, Rhodes or pads with the occasional organ sound, well, I don't think that the wood key action necessarily is going to be deal-breaking for you. Third, I would love to see a YC88 with this workflow and with this design language on it versus the old one. You'd be getting the best of both worlds. And then, yes, some of the sound coming out of the CK88 is going to be at a lower fidelity, but that's why I said if you're primarily using this for live purposes, not recording, well, I doubt you're even going to miss that extra little edge that the YC88 might give you. Thanks again for checking out another video here at Merriam Pianos. We love pianos. If you do, make sure you've hit that subscribe button so we can see you again next week. My name is Stu Harrison. Take care. Be sure to check out the description for all the links and additional information. We'll see you again soon.